Welcome to another episode of Theater Corner. I'm your host, Michael Taylor. Theater Corner is an interview series created as an ongoing effort to promote more diverse interest and involvement in the theater scene. Today, we're broadcasting from the lovely theater at Elementary Institute of Science here in Emerald Hills in San Diego, California. EIS is a nonprofit organization committed to increasing lifelong opportunities for students of Southeast San Diego through science, technology, engineering, and math education, also known as STEM. Their after-school, weekend, and school partnership programs broaden access to quality STEM experiences, foster critical thinking, expand technical skills, and encourage students to pursue STEM careers. I want to thank EIS for their generous sponsorship of today's episode. So silence your cell phones, folks. You're about to enter Theater Corner. Here we are with Justin Emeka, who's the professor of theater and Africana studies at Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio. Welcome to Theater Corner.
How you doing, brother? It's good to be here.
All right.
Thank you for having
really
me.
Appreciate you coming by here. This is a special edition of Theater Corner. You're
Okay.
the very second director to sit here. And,
Wonderful.
I really appreciate you having you. Before we go any further, I want to give you a heartfelt congratulations on being awarded the 2017 Drama League Fellowship.
Yes.
For classical directing.
That's right.
I don't want to mess that up. No, that's a huge award. I mean,
Thank
that's only 11 awarded in the country
Right.
of hundreds of applications.
Right, and there's actually only 2 classical directing fellows per each year. So there's 11 directors altogether, but of the classical directing fellowship, there's 2. So
All right.
It's more exclusive company.
All right, it's a huge accomplishment, well deserved.
Thank you very
I
much.
can tell.
Yes, thank you.
And so that fellowship, that's what's brought you to San Diego.
Yes, I'm in San Diego all summer long, assisting on 2 different Shakespearean productions, as well as creating my own workshop production, working with the MFA students. So I'm working on Richard II first, Hamlet, and then I'm working on my own adaptation of Macbeth.
Okay, and you're here working at the Old Globe Theater.
Correct.
In San Diego. How's this experience so far? What do you?
It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be at a theater with such incredible resources, and artistic freedom and liberty, and to be able to just kind of watch a well-tuned machine function, and put out a powerful story. That's really, what I'm interested in doing. So it's nice to be able to see how other directors approach Shakespeare,
That's awesome. And as a disclosure, I am on the board at the Old Globe, and on behalf of the board, I want to welcome you here, and we really appreciate you being here and adding to what the Globe does.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here, and I'm very excited about the work that your artistic director Barry Edelson is doing. He's really, on the cutting edge in terms of directing Shakespeare and just keeping a forward eye towards how we present Shakespeare to the contemporary audience.
Very good. And you mentioned the MFA students that you'll be working with. These are the MFA students studying at University of San Diego, which is quite a renowned program.
It is. It is. It's an incredible program. I mean, they basically get incorporated into the Old Globe's performance company for 2 years, so they get to perform professionally on stage as well as work with professional teachers in the meantime and between time. So it's a really rich program that immerses them fully in the experience and the total craft of theater.
Wow. I've heard that it's, because their foundation they establish is in Shakespeare. I understand that's as for an actor, if they get that foundation, they can go on. They can do anything else if they're skilled in Shakespeare.
Yeah, I mean Shakespeare. It requires you to develop a a lot of important muscles as an actor, you know. At the heart, it's great writing, and anytime an actor gets to work with great writing, dealing with high stakes, you know, that you have to justify, then, you know, it's like swinging heavy bats before you go up to the plate.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. You know, you're directing now. And this is your thing. But you've also you got some acting in your background as well.
Yeah, well, I started as an actor. You know, my passion for theater really began as a performer. You know, as a child, you know, my mother recognized, you know, that I was really, I liked being in the light, so to speak. I had a lot of energy. You know, I was the person who was never afraid to get in front of the class or read the parts that needed to be read, you know. And so I started going to acting classes at an early age and started auditioning for anything that I could do, you know. And I was able to be in professional performances when I was at a young age. And then around high school, I started to realize, to recognize, I guess, what I could and could not get called in for as a black actor. And so it started to really make me question, you know, what I wanted to do artistically in theater. I love theater, but I became frustrated a little bit with the boundaries that I saw in terms of whose story gets to be told and how a story is told, which then led me into directing.
I see. But along the way, you've done television and
I've done a little. I've done a little bit of everything, you know. But my heart is really in the stage. It's in theater, you know. And people ask me a lot, you want to go back to TV or film? And yeah, if it happens, but you know, the magic of live theater is really what seduces and inspires me as an artist, you know, being the living moment where we get to experience the human condition. That's the most thing that I'm concerned about as an artist and as a human being, is understanding and celebrating the human condition.
And so the director is the one that's basically steering the play. Is the director is in charge, so to speak, of the artistic process. We had Patricia McGregor on the program, and
she's wonderful.
Yes, she is. And she describes her process like taking something that's one-dimensional and making it three-dimensional.
Yes.
You have a particular approach to directing?
You know, that's the one thing that's why I love hearing other directors talk about their work. Directing is a relatively new art form. You know, the director's function in the theater has only emerged in the past 100 years, and then even more so in the past, 50 years, and even today. So the role of the director is still, kind of emerging and evolving, For me, what I love about directing is that it's really the convergence of all art forms. You have to know how to speak the language of music, movement, poetry, prose, design, visual arts, and your job as a director is to help facilitate the artistic vision of other artists. To create a space for other artists to bring their art into the table, and so the director provides the glue and the vision and the perspective that helps reveal the play, because the script is a literary art form.
Okay.
The play is Patricia said, a three-dimensional experience. Even maybe a five-dimensional experience in terms of how you feel it, with all your senses. You experience a play. And it is a deep question in terms of who is the author of the production. The playwright is the author of the play as a literary form, but who is the author of the production, any given production, And that's a shared experience between all the artists involved, including the playwright, including the actors, including the designers. They are helping author any given production, in a way that can never be recreated. It's created in the magic and the momentum of that community, and that's one of the most exciting things about theater for me, is working again with that live community.
Wow. That's that's a very good description. Do you ever? I always wonder if, as a director, without mentioning any particular performance, if you've had perhaps a script that maybe a play that perhaps wasn't, I don't know, maybe written so well that you've got to take on that task along with the actors to still make it something.
Yeah,
worth
a director, an actor, you don't have the luxury of recognizing a bad play when you're working on it. Your job is to mine what works in the play, is to find what works in the play. And so it is never constructive, no matter how bad the play is, to work from that position when you're working on it. You have to love, you have to fall in love with every character that you work on, with every text that you do. So, people often ask me, what's your favorite play? Whatever play I'm working on.
There
it's
you go.
Really, whatever play I'm working on, that's my favorite play in the world at that time, because I try and go head in, all the way in, and immerse myself in that text, and there's always something to love. There's always something to love about any people that grace the stage, that any people that grace the earth, And so your job as an artist is to find and celebrate that beauty, that complexity, that resilience that is within a text.
Remarkable, indeed. So you got a kind of unique thing because you're involved with productions. You're directing theaters, but you're also on the academic side. How's that balance?
Well, it's natural for me, because there's such an impulse to want to separate the two. You're an academic or you're artist, but for me, it's never been a separate thing. My scholarship has always informed my art, and my art always informs my scholarship. So I can't, particularly as a Black artist, I can't understand creating art without a firm understanding of the legacy and the history that has brought me to this moment in which I'm creating the art. So I never even really thought about it as it's developing two sides. You understand? It's just, that's the way I work, and I think most directors are like that as well, because it kind of demands you to become a historian, to become a philosopher, to become a psychologist, in the work. But I've just kind of formalized my role as an academician, as a professor in a college, in which I love as well, because it always puts me right in touch with the young people, and there's an infinite source of inspiration coming from every generation of young people that come through my classroom.
Right. That's awesome. So here at Theater Corners, it's quite the Black theme.
Come on.
So we tend to discuss diversity, inclusion, and so and then I brought the book that you've published a chapter in called Black Acting Methods, Critical Approaches, and you penned a chapter in here called Seeing Shakespeare Through Brown Eyes.
That's right.
I mean, that says a lot right there in the title. Maybe you could, there's some amazing insights in here, and I've learned a tremendous amount just reading through it myself. Can you tell us a little bit about this, and maybe even the title?
Seeing Shakespeare Through Brown Eyes. That really comes from a lot of my conversations with a dear friend and mentor of mine, Avery Brooks, who was a remarkable television, film, and stage actor and accomplished opera singer and musician, who really was one of the first artists to invite me to fully embrace my Blackness within the context of quote-unquote white classical theater, that it didn't have to be a separate movement, that these were two things, as Avery talked about, Africanizing Shakespeare, which really opened my mind up a lot to this idea in general, and had me thinking a lot about music, and how the Black aesthetic really, as a creative force, has the ability to transform everything it touches. Everything it touches, you know, whether it's religion, whether it's food, whether it's clothing, whether it's dance, whether it's music, whether it's visual arts.
Right.
The black aesthetic, you know, leaves its footprint everywhere, you know. So I really wanted to start to see, well, what about in theater, you know, where is that footprint? And not just with texts that are written by black authors, but particularly what happens to the black aesthetic when it encounters works that were written by white authors, you know. In the same way that what happens when John Coltrane plays, you know, Roger and Hammerstein's My Favorite Things, you know. And what does that music sound like through his soul, you know, in a way that doesn't replace what was done before, it doesn't challenge it, doesn't threaten it, it opens up a whole new dimension, you know, in what this song can sound like and what this song can say. And I feel like there's the same potential, you know, that is within quote unquote classical theater. You know, these classic authors, when we unapologetically let the black aesthetic shine through some of these texts where it's been discouraged. Right. You know, I mean, oftentimes as black artists, you feel like you have to kind of ethnically cleanse yourself and leave your culture at the door before coming into the rehearsal room. Well, what if we get to bring that culture into the room?
Wow.
How does it inform the work? That's what I'm interested in a lot in terms of my work with quote unquote classical theater.
You've even taken Macbeth and kind of done exactly that thing with exactly that with Macbeth.
Right, with Macbeth, with Midsummer Night's Dream, with Romeo and Juliet. You know, I am not a director that says, oh, you know, I don't want to be a black director. I just want to be a director. You know, I am unapologetically a black director, and I don't think that compromises my ability to just be a director. You know. I can be a human being and be a black, you know, and I feel like a lot of times there's a sense that you got to be one or the other. You know, my humanity, my artistry is defined by my blackness, and it informs how I understand a text, right? And so anytime I pick up a text, I start to imagine it within the context of black culture.
And so you talk about in here, like you give an example of like a white director with black performers in the play, and it's a classical piece, and he's pushing them more towards like imitating whiteness, and not even recognizing that these are black actors.
Right.
Which seems to be perhaps not the most agreeable approach.
Well, I think that as artists, we have to learn how to incorporate conversations of race and even more important culture into our artistic processes, you know. Not in a way that the process then becomes about race. And I think that's kind of the fear. If you talk about race, well, then it's just going to predominate the whole production, you know. But just to recognize how race informs character is an important thing for all directors, I think, to understand, you know, and to be able to engage. But particularly if you cast a non-white actor in a role that was written for a white actor, what is the artistic process to create that role? What are you saying? You know, in my experience, there's only 3 ways to approach it. You know, either you are going to have this non-white actor play a white character, and theaters make believe, so you can do that. Right. You know, a child can play a grown-up, a woman could play a man. It's all make believe. You know, so you can have a black actor play a white character, or you can have the character change, the ethnicity change to match the ethnicity of the actor. You know, so now this is no longer a white character. This is a black character within this world. You know, and that might mean a whole lot. That might mean a little. right? Or you can say, well, we're trying to create a reality where race doesn't exist. And this is what we call a colorblind world, you know? And that third way is infinitely more harder than people think, you know, I think. I think a lot of times people think they're creating a colorblind world when they're actually doing the first way. When they're actually saying, well, we want you to play a white character, but we're just not going to say it. We're going to say that you're just going to play a human being, you know? But a lot of, one of the subtle kind of privileges of white privilege is that you can be talking about whiteness without saying white. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like we say you go to Howard, which is a black university, but we don't say, and Howard is probably like 89% black. So, you know, but we don't say you're going to, you know, if you're going to University, UCLA, that you're going to a white school, or if you're going to Harvard, that you're going to a white school.
You're just going to a university.
You're just going to a university, even though it's majority white,
right.
You know. So again, when we have to be careful in our artistic processes, universal by default tends to go to whiteness. And so when you say, well, I just want you to be a human being, a lot of times you're saying a white human being without knowing it, depending on what conversation you're having. So you have to, directors have to be able to engage in an informed conversation about how race informs a role. And it doesn't mean that it's got to then, you know, dramatically change how the character, you know, it may or it may not. Because I think there's kind of a fear that to say, well, you know, to make it a black character, does that mean they're going to be doing hip hop and they're going to be, and that kind of shows us the narrowness, reveals the narrowness of how you perceive blackness. Because blackness is infinite. You understand what I'm saying? You got high yellow black, you got dark black, you got Africa black, you got Haiti black, you got New York black, you got Texas black, you got educated black, you got poor black. You got infinite possibilities. You understand what I'm saying? And it's within that, you know, kind of infinite pool where I tend to pull from my characters, you know, because I'm really interested in pulling them, finding the infinite of possibilities within blackness when we've been led to believe so often that blackness is this big, when really it's...
It's endless.
It's endless.
There's one part in your chapter that really caught me, and it's actually the part where you were talking about the Africanization of King Lear with Avery Brooks. And if some people don't know Avery Brooks from theater and these amazing roles he's played, they may know him from the movie Star Trek.
From the TV series.
Or TV series.
He was Captain Sisko.
Captain Benjamin Sisko of Deep 6-9.
Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine.
And now he was also, you know, for some people will know him from A Man Called Hawk in the 80s. Right. It was a cult classic, you know.
But, you know, underneath, aside from those characters, he's done some amazing things on the theater stage. And so it's the part where you describe, you know, Africanizing Shakespeare, and you were performing with him on this particular production of King Lear, and you describe, and it's majority black. It's an all black cast. And each rehearsal you warmed up with African dance, and so you write, hearing the drums and black tongues wrapped around Shakespeare's text every day invited you into the world and gave you unique confidence as an actor. I never experienced black culture in Shakespeare. I started to recognize the iambic pentameter inside the heartbeat of the drum, and it gave me a new way to embrace musicality of Shakespeare's verse and prose. Hearing my fellow actors deliver the text, I could hear how the iambic pentameter was a part of our natural rhythm of speech as opposed to some foreign speech pattern that we had to imitate.
Right.
That's you know, that really speaks volumes into, you know, what you're thinking, what you're approaching, what you're trying to explain there, you know, in terms of merging the classics with the cultural traditions.
Right, that's right. Integrating, you know, different classical traditions, because, you know, so often we're taught as actors we approach the kind of science of Shakespearean text as a very cerebral, quantified practice, and you mark this and you accent this and you write this down and you da, and that's fine. That's that's one approach, But for me, I couldn't own it doing it like that. It's hard. And the biggest struggle for an actor, for any text, for any character, is making that character yours,
right.
is owning that character, letting that character inhabit your body, inhabit your experience, And the more that you are incorporating yourself into that process, into that character, a lot of times the more creative and the more successful you are in delivering that role, And an actor doesn't want to be trying to recreate a character that's already been done.
Right,
You're
right.
trying to invent the character every time, So really this idea of taking ownership, owning a role. And growing up, I'd been introduced to Shakespeare, but I always felt a little bit on the outside of the process, And like I didn't have a right to claim these characters within my own vernacular and experience, And what Avery really did with that production was really invited me to, as I said, to see myself within a Shakespearean world in a way that was revolutionary for me, and I think a revolutionary for a lot of us who were in the room during that process, And just like with African dance, you don't count out and 1, 2, 3, 4,
right,
1,
right.
2. You go and it's a feeling. You got to feel the rhythm
True.
before you can dance it, And so similar from my approach with Shakespeare, understanding you got to feel the musicality of the language before just understanding it in an academic sense. You got to feel it. You understand? Right. And so a lot of the work that I've done with Shakespeare is a way that is trying to encourage or support actors feeling the musicality of the language.
Okay. I hear you, brother. I'm with you. So, a lot of these large regional theaters, one thing perhaps that's somewhat of a challenge is you go into the audience and the audience doesn't necessarily represent the whole community
Yes.
of that city, of that particular town. And so as far as potential black theater goers are concerned, what do you think are some of the things that perhaps hold them back from considering theater? Because I go to the Globe all the time, and I don't necessarily see so many folks that look like me in the audience.
Right.
What do you think perhaps are the roadblocks or perhaps challenges and getting black folks excited about theater or even consider?
But that's a really important issue, because equally important to kind of creating a positive artistic and cultural revolution in the theater, equally important to inviting new artists into the space is inviting new audiences, into the space. And so every theater in the country is really trying to figure out how to, revitalize their audience, as audiences become older and older, and the new generation seems potentially less inclined to go to the theater. For me, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. One, the obvious is the economic factor, that tickets are very expensive, and it's a huge kind of risk that you're taking if you're paying $150 to go see a Broadway show if it's not something that connects with you, if it's not a good story. So the stakes are high when you're paying a lot of money. But we also know that, Black folks will pay $150 to go see Beyonce, or to go see Jay-Z.
I was going to say,
So it's not that strictly, we can't say that, it's just money, So I think also you have to look to, is there is it an inviting experience? Is it an inviting environment, to come? Is there really an invitation? Because people go where they're invited.
True.
And people don't go where they're not invited, by and large. And I think theaters have to take a hard look and see, okay, really, who are you inviting into the space? And by a lot of this invitation becomes unspoken, by what shows you're doing, by how you present the art, by how you advertise the art,
the cast.
how you cast the pieces. Because, the Black and brown communities, though, are also working against an unfortunate legacy when it comes to theater, I mean, the first American theater, one might say the first form of American theater, as James Weldon Johnson talked about, was minstrelsy.
Right,
that's the first pure, American form, unique American form of theater, in which you had a form of theater that's one of its sole functions was to mock the humanity of Black people,
right,
or to promote the dehumanization of Black people, right? So Black people are coming into a theater space that not only was it not inviting to them, it was actually assaulting their humanity.
True.
You understand? And so we are unfortunately inheriting a theater that bears that ugly legacy, that ugly burden. And that's not 100 years ago.
Right.
I mean, that's 50 years, that's 20, you can still see, kind of remnants of this assault on Black humanity. When you go into a theater and you just see yourself as servants, or you just see yourself marginalized, what that does to your psychology, what does that does to your sense of esteem. And I don't know if theaters fully recognize or realize the impacts of marginalization on Black audiences, but we have to invite, Black and brown audiences to be at the center of the theatrical experience, not tokenization, where you just get to have one here, you're the best friend, but to put your story at the center, right, and then train white audiences to see themselves in Black and brown experiences. You understand? Unapologetically, and not to come out of the story and say, I didn't even recognize that they were Black. No, recognize that they were Black,
right, and
recognize that you still saw yourself in them.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? And so that's in terms of the audience work we have is teaching, taking risks, and training audiences to celebrate Black life and see themselves in Black and brown life.
Yeah. How much influence do you think the colorblind casting or the race-neutral casting helps in that effort of
That's a good question. I mean, I think that, at one point, colorblind casting was progressive, because just for its ability to incorporate Black and brown bodies on stage, it was kind of an initial step. But I don't see it. I think nowadays the way that it's used, unfortunately, actually takes us back. Instead of taking us forward, because if you're only, using colorblind casting because you don't know how to see color, and you don't know how to recognize the cultural distinctions in our society that are attached to race, then you're actually not you're not seeing me in the way that I want you to see me.
Okay.
And I'm still, you're still deeming certain communities invisible, in a way that if you're saying, well, the only way you can be in the building is if I'm not seeing your race or your culture. Right. Because I become uncomfortable when I'm forced to recognize that we have different distinctions, right? Then that's taking us back. We need to be able to look at me, see me for who I am, and embrace me as an equal, and know that we are still brothers and sisters in the world, in the human world, And I think, again, we fall back on colorblind casting a lot as a way to avoid conversations, important conversations on race and the artistic process.
So let's shift a little bit. So you're you're deep into capoeira.
Capoeira.
Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, capoeira. Yes.
Capoeira. And so, how does that kind of inform you as a director or even an actor? How does that that kind of help you out or assist you in what you do?
Capoeira is a unique art form that is an African martial art tradition that was really shaped and developed in Brazil, you know, during slavery and then the oppression that extended after slavery, you know. It was a way to preserve martial arts training, a way to help you physically develop yourself, but also as a way to preserve cultural memory, African cultural memory, in a way that the slave master didn't recognize. You know, so it was a culturally subversive art form as well. And like theater, capoeira is a convergence of art forms, right? So capoeira is movement and dance, with a little bit of fight, with music, with philosophy, with history, with singing. All of this makes capoeira, you know, and so and that's really what attracted me to the art form is how it is, again, it incorporates everything that inspires me, you know, stretching all the way back to Africa. So it really informed, well, it's just kind of a natural fit for me. And, you know, a lot of acting training programs incorporate movement systems, you know, to help the actor get into the body. And for me, capoeira was it. Capoeira was the way that helped me recognize the conversation of bodies that exists. And anytime two bodies come into a space, there's a conversation that goes on with body as much as with words, you know. And actors, directors have to be well versed in crafting conversations of bodies, you know. And so from an artistic standpoint, from a theatrical standpoint, that's what capoeira has made me extremely sensitive to in terms of how to use the body to craft a conversation.
I see. That's amazing. You're going to be here at San Diego for the extent of the summer, as part of this fellowship, the Drama League Fellowship. And so after that, what do you got coming up?
Well, this fall I'll be directing Toni Morrison in actually Lydia Diamond's adaptation of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm also working with Margaret Avery on developing a production of Glass Menagerie that's loosely set in East St. Louis that explores you know, the black aristocracy that emerged after the Civil War. And I continue to develop these Shakespearean productions of Macbeth and Midsummer Night's Dream.
Okay. And while you're at Oberlin, is it like every semester or once a year you do a production that there at the college?
Well, I tend to direct every other year.
Every other year?
Every other year on the main stage. Sometimes I'll do other, you know, kind of more smaller private projects, honors projects and stuff. But I also, you know, from Oberlin's my base, but from Oberlin, you know, I direct and travel all over the country. And this past year I was awarded tenure, which is provides a wonderful base.
Congratulations
on
that,
security.
Yes.
Which really then allows me to stay focused on work that I'm inspired by and not have to work with the desperation of, hey, just, you know, give me a job. I'll direct anything. I'll direct anything the way you want it, you know. So it allows me to be fairly particular with what projects I take on and how I take them on.
Wow, you're a remarkable person. And
thank you. No, as are you.
No, you truly are. I really mean that. And what you give, you know, in terms of knowledge to black actors and folks involved in theater in general. I don't think you necessarily need to be black to really get something from the information that you're sharing, the knowledge you're sharing.
Right. Well, Lorraine Hansberry said, you know, that this often, I'm paraphrasing, but, you know, it's a misconception to think that in order to be universal, you have to be non-specific, you know, but actually you reveal the universal by being very specific. So although, you know, a lot of my reference points is black culture, that does not mean I'm just speaking to black people.
True.
You know, understand? Yeah. I'm ultimately interested in the human condition. how I know to understand the human condition is through, the culture and the experience that informs who I am, But ultimately, I want everybody to pull something, to be able to pull something from what I'm talking about.
Right, right. All right. So I look forward to many more conversations while you're in San Diego.
I look forward
I'm going to try to take advantage of that every opportunity I get. You're quite wise and you're quite knowledgeable about theater and classical theater, and I appreciate that. And
I want to say, but I appreciate what you're doing here on Theater Corner, because we really need more people who are interested in generating conversation that will help us, rethink or even revolutionize how we approach theater in the 21st century, And a lot of people don't necessarily have the foresight to be thinking in that way,
I see.
So this is what you're doing here is really inspiring to me and really validating to me as well. So I want to really thank you for having me here, and I wish you all the best and continued success on more shows.
Oh, thank you so much. A labor of love is what it is.
That's right.
So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
I know you got to get to the theater from here. You
right.
got nothing but rehearsals in front of you, and so thanks so much for coming by and giving us a little bit of the spare time that you barely have much of.
It's
as
been
busy
my
as you
pleasure.
are.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you, viewers, for stopping by for another episode of Theater Corner, and we'll see you next time.